Hello again. Both in private emails and public comments made here, quite a few people have remarked with some justice that I am very fond of explaining what I think is wrong with Western society, but not nearly so ready to offer practical advice about what is to be done to combat what I perceive to be the ills of the modern world. Such criticism is well founded. Nobody likes hearing some old man droning on all the time about how society is going to hell in a handcart and then not following it up with some positive suggestions for how matters might be improved and changed for the better. This has been on my mind lately because I have been told of several schemes afoot, including one which entails young people with what some would call right-wing or conservative views deliberately taking jobs in the civil service, police and teaching profession with a view to attacking modern ideology from within and positioning themselves for the time when in 20 years, 25 years, they will be in some way authorities. Others have advocated lending support to groups such as Patriotic Alternative or even the English Defence League. The problem with small political groups in Britain which work to oppose the two main political parties is that they never end up amounting to much. I'll leave aside the question of whether it would be a good or desirable thing if they did. The fact is that they never do and probably never will. I can remember many such. I can remember as far back as Colin Jordan and his friends, and then the National Front, and of course the British National Party, to give a few examples. The truth is that such groups reach a certain size, achieve some modest success that makes it seem that they're about to reach a breakthrough, and then they fragment and collapse. 10 years ago, the BNP had 4 local councillors in the Epping Forest district where I live, including, almost incredibly, a Jewish member for the party, a woman called Patricia Feldman Richardson, who became a local councillor here. There was much excitement at the time, as though this was the breakthrough in local politics that everybody had been waiting for. But it all came to nothing. Today there are no BNP councillors anywhere in Britain. The chances of getting an MP elected on an anti-immigration or anti-multiculturalism platform are non-existent. Is it worth starting a new right-wing or anti-immigration party or group? Probably not, because it will fail just as previous ones have done. This is despite the fact that an awful lot of ordinary people agree wholeheartedly with the kind of things which I say on this channel. When it actually comes to voting, whether for local elections or national ones, everybody still votes Labour or Conservative. Is the case quite hopeless then? I don't actually think so, but changing the narrative or the general theme of modern British society, entrenched as it is in a certain way, is likely to be an arduous and uphill struggle, one which will also have the effect of making those taking part very unpopular in some quarters. I myself am unlikely to win any popularity contests amongst ordinary people. One constructive thing which every one of us can do is simply to ask people why they hold this or that fashionable opinion. I'm not suggesting starting arguments all the time or contradicting people, but rather simply asking, what grounds do you have for thinking that? Or perhaps, why do you say so? All too often these days I've noticed that people will trot out meaningless expressions which are vaguely left-wing in inspiration but mean absolutely nothing at all. Folk pick up these phrases from their newspapers or television and then parrot them unthinkingly. It's quite scary. I suspect in Germany in the 1930s, people used to say things like "ein Reich, ein Volk" in the same way without stopping for a moment to consider what they were actually saying. So we hear that we must respect somebody's opinion, even if that opinion is harmful nonsense. Respect is one of the modern buzzwords, as I'm sure most of you know. When somebody says something like, well, we have to respect so-and-so's opinion, it's worth asking, why? This alone, though, can infuriate people and get them annoyed, but it can also actually have the effect of making them think. If somebody says of the illegal immigrants landing on English beaches, oh, we can't just turn them away, we might ask, why not? This is less with the intention of promoting our own views than it is getting people to stop in their tracks and ask themselves what they actually think and why they think it. They may well get angry at what they see as a challenge, but each time this is done, it's a little nudge which might eventually be enough to jog somebody out of their comfortable groove of groupthink and get them to ask themselves some hard questions. I'm sure we all know the expression silence means consent, and if every time people say things which we find dangerous or injurious to society or to Britain, every time we keep quiet about that, we are implicitly consenting to that view. By implication, we're agreeing with them. It's not a question of contradicting somebody's deeply held beliefs. I respect people who actually hold other beliefs to me. It's rather letting people or encouraging them to discover for their own selves that they don't really hold views on the matter of multiculturalism or immigration, but they're simply drifting with the tide, as it were. If this happens often enough, and people are increasingly asked just why they think all cultures deserve equal respect, why they believe immigration to be an unalloyed good, whether anybody at all should be entitled to come to the country and so on, it might just possibly disrupt their usual way of thinking and make them really think. MPs and newspapers are also susceptible to change if they feel that enough readers or voters hold a particular opinion. It can do no harm to send petitions to MPs or write letters to newspapers to make freedom of information requests to government agencies or local authorities and then draw attention to the information thus obtained. Most local newspapers are only too keen to be alerted to some news story which will make readers sit up and take notice. If you do the legwork for them by making a freedom of information request about, for example, the effects of immigration on local housing or schools and things like that, local papers might well publish a story about it, and that story is sometimes taken up by national newspapers. They are far more likely to do this if it's a private individual contacting them than they would be if it were the BNP or English Defence League. I'm afraid that groups like that give the kiss of death to any sort of venture of that kind. All this is very much an individual enterprise rather than something which is done as a group. Nevertheless, such movements consisting of individuals can be enormously effective if enough people are involved. Imagine us all as drops of rain. Each one is in itself a fairly innocuous thing, but when enough of them are falling, they constitute a storm. Perhaps it's time to start such a storm.